The Rabbi said, we do with Beis Rivka every year, right? And I tried to speak in the Maimorim. Chav Daled is a particularly hard Maimed. It's a particularly hard Maimed. And I think the right way to put it is, it's so hard because there's so many different sugyas. There's so many, the Rebbe stops at so many different points and explains them. It's not like there was 2 or 3 or 4 points, it's like 6 or 7 or 8 points. And each point is a iyun. It's mamish a iyun. Mem Daled is interessante Maimed, because in certain ways, the Rebbe breaks from the mold of the Beis Rivka. There's certain things about Mem Daled which, if you wouldn't know it's a Beis Rivka, you wouldn't think it's a Beis Rivka. There's certain things about the Maimed which don't follow the regular pattern in certain paratim. So here's what we do. Every year we learn the Pedic, and the way I started was I review the Beis Rivka until this point, and then we learn the Pedic, which is for this year. That's how we do it. And we have 2 weeks of today and next Thursday night in Mitzvah Shabbos. Okay, so let's go. Let's start from the beginning, okay? Kaidem called Ersha Zach is, as we all know, in Tafresh Pei Gimel, the Rebbe wants to see the Frierdiker Rebbe. So we now know from Chadakov's Rishimis that the Rebbe told him that the first time I saw the Frierdiker Rebbe was Chalamet Sukkot Tafresh Pei Gimel, and the second time he visited was Pashat Boyim B'Shalach. The Rebbe was not yet 21. He was 20. And Vias Weiss, it's hard to know for sure, but Vias Weiss, there's letters about that visit from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Rebbe Achei Mushka. He went to see the Rebbe. It was Chassan and Zach. But he was from Frierdiker Rebbe, and he was there for 2 Shabbos, Boyim B'Shalach. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said those 2 Shabbos are Maimer. The Maimer of Pasha's boy started, V'hi b'yetzem ha'yem hazeh, yotzak l'tivot l'shem eretz Mitzrayim. And about 15 lines into the Maimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, and then from that point, it's word for word our Maimer, till the end. The Frierdiker Rebbe's. But then the Maimer of boy was 10 parakim. By us was divided up into 4 Maimorim, each one 5 parakim. For Yud Shvat, for Yud Gimel Shvat, for Purim, for Beis Nissen. Then the first Shabbos he said 10 parakim. And Pashat B'Shalach, I don't know how Maimer started. He said the last 10 parakim. And by the way, you should know, we know where the Maimorim come from. The Beis Rivka, the first 10 parakim Beis Rivka is Tafresh and Ches Beis Rivka. It's almost word for word. Tafresh Nun Ches from the Rebbe Nishma says, it's almost word for word. And the second half, the Tzivos Hashem part and Eitzres, is in Tafresh Pei, Pashat Boy. You can see the Maimorim. The Frierdiker took from Taten. The Frierdiker remember his father's Maimorim, and he added Hagos and Ha'oris. Sometimes the Ha'oris were very long, and sometimes the Ha'oris were quite short. And if I'm not mistaken, these 2 Maimorim, then there's not a lot. It's basically Maimorim from the Rebbe Nishma Seidim with a few Ha'oris. And the Rebbe was there. So the second time the Rebbe visited the Frierdiker Rebbe said the Beis Rivka. And 27 years later, the Rebbe gave out in the Maimorim the Frierdiker for his Estalkus. So it's very precise that when the Rebbe shows up, the Mershan Mo, the Frierdiker Rebbe says the Beis Rivka, and this Maimer is, in the Rebbe's own words, the Tzavah of the Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe's Tzavah is the Maimer Beis Rivka. What does Beis Rivka talk about? Beis Rivka has 2 parts. The first part is the job. And the second part is who does the job. The job and the jobber, okay, if you will. What is the job? The job is also the mikdash v'shachante b'seichem. The job is to make for the Eibush Beis HaMikdash. A mishkan or mikdash lo yizbarach. That's the avodah, right? That's the avodah. That the Eibush was in this world, and the Eibush left, and the Eibush came back. But when the Eibush came back, he said also the mikdash b'seichem. And there's different ways of learning it. Whether it has to do with Chet Egel, doesn't have to do with Chet Egel. The bottom line is, Moshe Rabbeinu built Eibush a small house, and the Eibush wanted a big house. How big is the house the Eibush wants? But Teich Kol Echad Echad Yisrael, the whole world should be his home. So even if you're going to learn that the V'asur the Mikdash Shechanti B'Seichem is not connected to Chet Egel, in other words, Hashem gave the Mishkan Stam Azoi, but the Beis HaMikdash that Hashem told Moshe to build was small. And therefore, there's the avoid of Shechanti B'Seichem, Teich Kol Echad Echad Yisrael. In other words, what makes Beis Rivka not just a Sipur Dvorim? What makes Beis Rivka not just a nice story, you know? The Eibush was here, we kicked him out, and then we invited him back in, and he came back in, and he moved into a house. It's a ma'aser. How is this not only a story? And the answer is because the Eibishter had us build him a home that was small, but the kavana is to make that home bigger to encompass the whole world. And of course, there's two psukim, right? Tzadikim yirshu oretz v'yishkanu adoled. Tzadikim mazechat el mabah because they bring the Shekhinah into this world, and then v'shachanti b'seicham. And one of the Basel Leganis, the Rebbe says that tzadikim build the Beis HaMikdash. That's the pasuk. Tzadikim in the Medrash they bring both of these psukim. Tzadikim yirshu oretz v'yishkanu adoled. And then the second pasuk v'asel the Mikdash v'shachanti means now that the Beis HaMikdash is built, you do the avoid inside the Beis HaMikdash. You understand? So, now that you know the job, which has to make the whole world in the Beis HaMikdash for the Eibishter, the question becomes, so what is the job? How do you do it? And in one word, the job is the iskafi v'esapch. Don't run and hide under a rock. Don't live a life of holiness. You have to live a life of holiness, but you have to take on the world, right? You make it, you fulfill the purpose of making the Eibishter Beis HaMikdash, a day iskafi v'esapch, by bending and transforming klipa into kedusha. And he gives 3 examples. The first example is karbonas. You take an animal, and the animal and yourself, and you give it away to the Eibishter. The second example is shtus. You take atzei shitim, boards that are called shtus, and you mahapech shtus de li'uma, then the shtus de gedusha. And the third example is krashim. As he said, krashim al mishkan, atzei shitim emdim. You take krashim, take sheker, which of the world, and you mahapech it to a keresh and a kesher, you make it into a basement for the Eibishter. This is the first half of Basei Lagani, and it lasts 9 parakim. This is the first half.
That's not iskafia.
Huh?
These 3 examples are all
Iskafia v'esapra. It's 2 steps. Iskafia v'esapra. First you bend and then you transform. The paratim, mer von dem is it negia yes. Then comes the second half of the Basei Lagani. Who makes the dir b'tachtenim? And the answer is the dir b'tachtenim is made by the tzivos Hashem. Right? What's the Mount tzivos Hashem? The diuk is, it's not just Eved, it's Chayal. Not just a servant, not a slave, but a soldier. A slave is ready for Kabbalah sale. And a soldier is ready for Mesilas Nefesh. So the diuk is Tzivos Hashem, that the Yidden they're not just Avdei Hashem, they're Tzivos Hashem. They're not just the army of the slaves of the Eibishter, which are ready for Kabbalah sale, but the Tzivos Hashem, they're ready for Mesilas Nefesh Mamish. And the Tzivos Hashem, they're the ones who do this. So the whole second half of the Basei Lagani is talking about the Tzivos Hashem. The first half talks about what the mission is, and the second half talks about how the mission has to be accomplished. So in order to explain it, the Rebbe starts discussing Machon. The Frierdiker Rebbe does, Machon. And he suggests that there's 2 kinds of wars. There is a war called Lishlel Shalol V'Lovus Vois, where you fight a war to take from another country, to acquire wealth from somebody else. And whenever you fight a war, and the purpose of the war is to acquire wealth, or to acquire land, to acquire people, you have to evaluate the possible gains or the value. It's a war for profit. If it's a war for profit, the investment has to be less than the return. So you have to calculate how much you're going to lose or how much you're going to. It has to be worth it. But then there's a Mechamas Nitzach. And Mechamas Nitzach means a war that you can't lose. In other words, there's nothing that you won't do because you can't lose this war. You can't lose this war, your Eis Metzias. Finished. In one of my mods, there says the meaning of Mechamas Nitzach is that it has to happen as the way the king wants it, down to the tiniest minutia. It can't just be because that the king wants it. Every single detail has to be exactly what the Melech wants. And when you're fighting a Mechamas Nitzach, there's new rules altogether. Number 1. Yeah, number 1. The Melech is machnis atzme b'tachsisi mulchama. The king doesn't do what kings normally do, which is b'yesik and yichudi Allah, and let his generals fight. This war he fights himself. He goes to fight this war. Number 2. He's mevazbeis called the eitzes asher otzra avesav. He dispenses, he gives out treasure that's been collected by him and his father and his grandfather for generations, that's so precious and so sublime that you don't even show it to people. Not only you don't use it, you don't even show it to people. And now, because of this Mechamas Nitzach, you not only show it, you give it away recklessly, bizbuz, because whatever it takes to win the war, you're going to do. And then the third thing it does in the Maimon is Mashlachayv min Neged. The king throws away his life. You show in a lot of the Maimorim, the Rebbe doesn't like to say the words Mashlachayv min Neged, so the Rebbe says Lashon Mesaken Eschayev, Mitasamach. He risks his life. He puts his life in sakana. The Frierdiker Rebbe says Mashlachayv min Neged, and the Eshter Yon, the Rebbe spoke that Inyan. But this year's Basar Lagani in Chavdal, I think the Rebbe changes from Masha Chai V'Negev to Mesake Liktchan Sakona. So the Frierdiker Rebbe develops a concept of a war that you can't lose. And that's the continuation. Right? The first half of the Maimed is Kafia V'Hapcha, making a diddly Yisbarach B'Tachtenim. And the second half, Maimed is saying this endeavor to do a Kafia V'Hapcha and make a diddly Yisbarach B'Tachtenim is one of those things that it has to happen. It can't not happen. That's the Kavanah Sabriya. It's a Mechamas Nitzach, and it must happen. And therefore, kings behave in ways that they normally do not behave. Now, all three of these points, the Frierdiker Rebbe gets a ganz verkocht in the middle one. He starts this 12th Perek Yud Beis, to explain what is the meaning of the Eibishter's treasure. And this goes on for at least 5 parakim, maybe even 6. Especially explaining what's oitzer. And the nakuda of oitzer, in this maimer of Chav Daled, I think different maimer I'm saying, different efana, but in this maimer, the meaning of the word oitzer means it's hidden. No one knows what it is. It's hidden. Basamecha. And because oitzer is hidden, it's higher than Eidin Seif. That's how the Rebbe develops it in this maimer. Again, in other maimer may be different, but this maimer, that's what explains oitzer. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Lahavin Eitzel Lamayla. You have to know Eitzel Lamayla. Is the way you explain Eitzel Lamayla, he says you have to first magdim Mashit Tekun Yezeir, Ein Seif Lamayla Adin Ketz, or Lamayla Adin Ketz, or Lamatamat Adin Dach. Right? Ein Seif is one thing. It's not two things. Ein Seif is godliness. But Ein Seif has 2 characteristics. No matter how high you go, it's higher. And no matter how low you go, it's also there. Ein Seif Lamayla Adin Ketz, or Lamata Adin Dach. So in Perek Yud Beis, which was to my mind from 2 years ago from Chav Beis, they have a Pashat, it's Pashat Stamavov. It explains what Eidin Sof is. Perek Yud Gimel and Yud Daled, which was last year and this year, he explains Ein Seif Mata Dein Tachlis. And next year, Perek Tezvav, he explains the Maila Dein Ketz. So the Rebbe observes that the Lashon of Tekun Yezeir is Ein Seif L'Maila Dein Ketz, and then L'Mata Dein Tachlis. And the Frierdiker Rebbe explains it backwards. He doesn't explain it in the order of the Tikkun Yezeir. First he says Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis. Then he says Ein Seif Perek Yimel Yadalet. Then he says Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Ketz Perek Tezvav. Even though the Tikkun Yezeir shet fakert. So the Rebbe says the reason the Frierdiker Rebbe reverses it because Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis is easier to understand. Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Ketz is a lot harder to understand. So by first explaining Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis helps you understand Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Ketz. Or that Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Tachlis is hard than Ein Seif Lamata. Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Ketz is hard than Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis. And Oitzer is higher than both. Oitzer is higher. Oitzer is not only hard than Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis, Oitzer is higher than Lamayla Dein Ketz. So if he wants to be Mafli Oitzer, he breaks it down. There's a Madrei called Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis. Then there's a higher in Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Ketz. And Oitzer is higher than both. So for these 2 reasons, the Frierdiker Rebbe reverses it. First he explains Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis, and then he goes to Lamata Dein Ketz.
2 reasons again. One is because Ein Seif
it's much easier to understand, and it leads you to it. And the second is because it's a lower and a higher inyan. And since Oitzer is higher than both, so first explain the lower inyan, and then you explain the higher inyan, and then you say Oitzer is even higher than Lamayla Dein Ketz.
Oitzer next year?
Oitzer, no, next year is Lamayla Dein Ketz. Oitzer is at least Tezayin, could be even Yud Zayin. The Rebbe develops this. It's the biggest sugya in the Basar Lagani. This Ein Seif Lamayla Dein Ketz. It's a Tikkun Yezeir.
Second reason why it says Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis before Lamayla Dein Ketz, different than the Tikkun Yezeir, is because what?
Because Oitzer is higher than both.
Oitzer
Start
is
with the
later.
lowest level and we go higher.
I asked him why Ein Seif Lamata is coming before Ein
It's lower
Seif
than
Lamayla.
Oitzer.
Tikkun Yezeir says Ein Seif Lamayla and Ein Seif Lamata, and then Oitzer.
The Tikkun Yezeir doesn't talk about Oitzer.
Okay, fine.
The Frierdiker Rebbe talks about Oitzer.
Okay.
So if you want to explain what's higher, you start from the first level, then you go to the second level, and then you get to what's higher than both.
Ein Seif Lamata is lower, and then goes higher.
Yeah. So in the Maimer of Memdale, the Rebbe says like this: there's 2 parakim dedicated to Ein Seif Lamata Dein Tachlis, Perek Yud and Perek Yud. But they're opposites. Now they will stay there. There's two prakim dedicated to Ein Seif Ma'at Adin Tachlis. Perik Yomit, but they're opposites. They're opposites. How are the opposites? The Nekuda of Perik Gimel is that Hashem is hidden in the world. Ein Sof Lamat Adin Tachlis is that there's even Klipa, lowest worlds. This Perik Dalad is Hashem is revealed. It's the same idea. Ein Seif, godliness, is Lamat Adin Tachlis. But in last year's Pedic, the point was Hashem is hidden even in the lowest klippos. And this year he says, no, punkt verkehrt, that the Eibush is revealed even in the lowest klippos. Ein Seif, Lamat, Adin Tachlis. Wherever you look, you'll see the Eibush. I think get this. Wherever you look, you'll see the Eibush. That's what I'm explaining. Huh?
You just have to look.
Or you have to pay attention. Right. Whatever, you have to look, you have to pay. But it's not just there, it's revealed. That's what the Rebbe develops. Ein Seif, Lamat, Adin Tachlis means is Eibush, Elokus is everywhere. And in our Pedic, he's adding Elokus is begili everywhere. As they get this, as they get the Maimed. So the Maimed of Tafshin Chav Daled, is going to discuss the idea that Ein Seif Lamat Adin Tachlis means that Hashem is revealed everywhere. The Maimed of Tafshin Mem Daled, it's the Rebbe asked the kasha on the Fidik Rebbe's Maimed. And the kasha that the Rebbe asked in the Fidik Rebbe's Maimed is that we know that the Eibush creates the world not with oyer. That's in Yonei Gilui, but the Eibush creates the world with shame. That's in Yonei Helam. So the Rebbe begins his Maimed by telling you that this Pedic is about Gilui, and then after he tells you that the Pedic is about Gilui, that's the kasha. How come the Fidik Rebbe in his Maimed discusses Ein Seif Lamat Adin Tachlis, that all things get their chayis from oyer or from chayis, and not from koyach, when in reality the Eibush says in Alter Rebbe that in Tanya that the Eibush creates everything through shame, and shame isn't even helam. So in other words, the Fidik Rebbe is avoiding a very, very important thing. He's describing Ein Seif Lamat Tachlis. Why? Hashem is revealed everywhere because Hashem creates everything. Hashem creates it the kind of way that He's revealed. So but it's not true. Hashem creates and He hides because creation is not through earth. Creation is through shame. And the Rebbe gives verschiedene answers. And the final answer that the Rebbe gives is the Eibush creates the world through oyer, and the Eibush creates the world through shame. That we should be magal the lakus of shame also, and the lakus of shame is higher than the lakus of oyer. That's the Maimed of Mem Daled. It's interesting Maimed. You don't usually have this. Basically, the Maimed of Mem Daled is not explaining the Beis Rivka. It's challenging it. The Maimed is a kasha. The Rebbe says, I don't understand the Rebbe, but why does he say it's not true? The creation is not from oyer, and chayis, the creation is from shame. And his teretz is that we're magal the lakus of shame, and since shame is an even helam, so its makar is even higher, so it's even higher gilui. But that's how the Maimed of Daled goes. He really challenges the Basi Lagani, doesn't undo his challenge. He adds to what the Fidik Rebbe says another idea, the from shame and the gilui lakus from shame. We'll get to it. But now it's time for us to do some learning, yeah? The good news about these shiurim is we can stop when we want. Why? We have next week. Wasn't
it like Shem Havai and Elokim? So why is it such a big kasha?
No. Shame doesn't mean the Eibishter's names. Shame means Yosef Yitzchak, Moshe.
Oh, I thought you said the Eibishter's
Wie heißt du? Du bist Yosef. Yes, Yosef. Wie heißt du? What's your name? Hananya. Shame means the name of each nivra. No.
Through his name.
No, through our names.
Through our names.
It says in Tanya that every single creation, the Eibishter creates b'chol rega with that name. So the shaila is the name is hidden. How does the Rebbe say Ein Seif Lamat Adin Tachlis? Because the Eibishter creates with oyer. And when you look at the creation, you see the oyer. In Tanya says the opposite. So the whole Maimed, Basi Mem Daled, is challenging the Fidik Rebbe's Maimed. It's not explaining it, it's challenging it. And the teretz doesn't take away the challenge. The teretz says, the Fidik Rebbe says that the whole world, the Eibush is revealed because they revealed with oyer. And I'm telling you that even deeper than oyer is shame. So why does the Fidik Rebbe say oyer if it's shame?
Deeper than his or?
Because shame happens b'derech havdalah. I'm not teaching in whole Chassidus on 1 foot. Oyer is in a march, it's only ha'ara. Shame happens b'derech havdalah, so it's etzem. And the Machon is that we're going to be magal the lakus of shame also. And we're magal the lakus of shame also. It's a higher gilui than the gilui through oyer. That's how the Mem Daled Maimed. I find this unusual in Beis Rivka. The Mem Daled Maimed is the Fidik Rebbe questioning what the Fidik Rebbe says, and he never undoes the. In other words, he's not explaining how the Frierdiker Rebbe says it right, he adds to the Frierdiker Rebbe the idea of shame, which in this Perek is not Bechlal. So it's very, very unusual, I think, very unusual. And the most unusual thing to me in this Maimed is the Rebbe in Memdalet starts off typical Basiligani. And by the way, he brings Neira Lila B'nei Adam, he brings that the Avedas had to happen. They made sure those Avedas had to happen. Chet HaDavirishin, they had to happen. Those Avedas, certain Avedas have to happen. Why? Because the Eibishter wants Avoida. If they don't do those Avedas, then the Kavanah happens without Avoida. And Avoida has a Maile, the Maasat Tshuva, because of his Kafi Veshapcha. So those Avedas had to happen because the Eibishter wanted the Kavanah to be Dafka, the Kavanah of Tshuva, and his Kafi and his Hapcha, not Tzadikim. So those Avedas were going to happen.
So then you're mixing Bechir and Hashgacha Pratis.
Okay. Yeah, and then he starts talking about a little bit, talks about Shtus, about Kedesh. He talks about Tzivas Hashem. Tzivas Hashem, the army. And when it comes to Tzivas Hashem, he's Meidech. Tzivas Meidech. What's the Zarich of the Tzivas Hashem? V'acharechen yetu b'rechush gadol. And the rechush gadol is the Tzutzik Kedushas, the Birurim. That the soldiers come out of Mitzrayim and take with them the Tzutzik Kedusha. And he brings the famous word that the Parei chased after them to bring them the Tzutzik Kedusha. Parei comes after the Jewish people. He chases after B'shalach Parei Esa at Midgeshik the lesson in Tzutzik Kedusha v'ditim gelost in Mitzrayim. So he mentions Tzivas Hashem, and he mentions the Tzivas Hashem he mentions Kabbalah Selah Mesiras Nefesh, both words a few times, Kabbalah Selah Mesiras Nefesh. And he explains why you call them Tzivas Hashem, because their inyan is to be Varan Tzitz Kedusha. But he doesn't mention Milchamas Nitzachim. He doesn't mention, the whole thing about war is missing. The Rebbe in the Maimer Tafshin Dal Mem does not mention Milchamas Nitzachim. He doesn't mention Machnes Atzme Mitachsisim Mechome. He doesn't mention Bizbus HaEtzes. He for sure doesn't mention Masakin Eschaya, Vashach HaNegev. He doesn't even mention the Tikkun Ezeyah. The Rebbe doesn't even mention Tikkun Ezeyah. He doesn't mention Tikkun Ezeyah. He just goes straight to our Perek. He talks about Tzivas Hashem and goes straight to our Perek. Why? Because what's Tzivas Hashem var in the Tzutzitz? What's our Perek? The Tzutzitz that are stuck. And where do you have it? In shame, not in oyer, which our Maimer doesn't have. That's how the Rebbe's Maimer develops. But anyway, let's now learn the Maimer Perek Yudalid. And obviously, most of what we're going to say is going to be from Chav Dalid, because the Maimer the Ikirus, the Rebbe is explaining the Maimer Perek Yudalid. In the Dalid Mem Maimer, the Rebbe is challenging the Yudalid. V'hine, B'kolzeh means, in spite of the fact that there are very, very, very low klippas, very, very low klippas, very, very low klippas, and these low klippas get their chayas from the Eibishter, like the Rebbe explained last year. And by the way, you know, when the Rebbe talks about klippas, yeah, how many klippas are there? Klippa number 1 is klippas nega, yeah? Klippa number 2 is Shach with Me'es Lagamri, that the Eibishter created. What's klippa number 3? If a Yid doesn't have Aveda. Because it says in Tanya Perich of Dalid, Ki'ilu Keifa Ba'achdusa Yesa Mimena. A Yid doesn't have Aveda, Yitush Kodmach, he's worse than Klippa. But the Rebbe says there's many kinds of Avedas. What is the worst Aveda? And this is Barichas in the end of the last Perek. Last year the Rebbe spoke about, Frierdiker speaks about Barichas, and the Rebbe brings it in this year, Barichas also, Lefiyarach. Is when you use Teda to say against the Teda. In other words, this klipa is rois gabre. There's the klipa of an avera made in she'oil vayol, and in klipas that have to do with avera, the worst avera is when you use the teda to pasken hepach teda. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, God is there too. Nishna is the Eibishter in klipa, the Eibishter is an avera. Nicht nur als Eibishter in Aveda, der Eibishter is an Aveda, wenn man nicht so sein Teile für an Aveda. The Eibishter is there also. That's how the Rebbe develops. The idea of Klippa. The Rebbe develops the idea of Klippa. So in spite of all of this, the Eibishter gives life. Meaning, even though there's such low Klippas, and the Eibishter has to give chayes to all these Klippas, so again, if you're learning the Maimer from Mem Daled, and once you learn from Daled, you can say this Pshat Chav Daled also. What he's saying is, not that Pshat Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is revealed everywhere. If you look close, you'll see that the Eibush is revealed everywhere. Okay? Now, So the word va'ata has to weiter astire. In Tov Shin Chov Daled, the Rebbe explains that the word ata means tzimtzum. In Tov Shin Mem Daled, the Rebbe explains that ata means atzmus. Eat your heart out. In Tov Shin Chov Daled, the Rebbe translates ata, that ata means tzimtzum. Why? Because it says in Tanya that ata is Asius Aleph bis Tov and Hem is Oisapeh. It says in Tanya. So the Rebbe says the word ata means not atzmus, it means Oisius. Oisius is tzimtzum. So the Rebbe in Tov Shin Chov Daled, ata means the Rebbe just made samsim himself. And the way the Rebbe says it in the Maimed, of course everything happens from the Eibishter. But it can happen from the Eibishter as the Eibishter is. And then come from the Eibishter as the Eibishter hides himself in Seder Ishtalshos. And the diak of the word va'ata is that the Eibishter is Mechava the worlds, Mechayim have the worlds in a way of tzimtzum, right? What did he say in Mem Daled? That Ata was an Atzmos. Ata do, Atzmos ain't Sav Baruch Hu, Vatek. Ata is higher than a name. Ata means Atzmos. So B'meil in Tov Shin Daled Mem, he says you should know that what is the type of this post Kulam? That not only the Eibush is everywhere, the Eibush is everywhere revealed. That the way the Eibush that creates the world, even the Klippas, and even the Klippas that do with Aveda, and even the Klippas that have to do with the worst Aveda of all, which is Magal Lepola B'tesh Leik Alocha, Nishtot, the Eibush Dotten Faran, the Eibush Dotten Hashem is revealed. You understand? So there's two Va'atos. There's the At of Tov Shin Chov Daled, and the At of Tov Shin Mem Daled, and there's a different Va'at. Va'ata Machayes Kulam, they give life to everything. So the Rebbe explains.
Because he's saying how the Kedusha finds itself in the lowest places. So Ata is the Atzmus. Atzmus finds itself in the Oisius.
Yeah, but the meaning of Ata Atzmus is without a shinoi. It's without a shinoi. And Ata Oisius is with a shinoi. Listen, I'm not going to argue, but that's how I see it. And the Rebbe says, Ata Machayes Kulam, right? One of the things that have in Chassidus is, what's the difference between Chayes and Havoya, right? What's the difference between your guf and your neshama? Your guf is a diamond. It's a lump of clay, right? It's a shtick fleish, right? The guf is nothing. In other words, when a person looks at the body alone, like you look at a stone alone, there's nothing compelling you to say that there's something more here than the Gashmi. But when you see life, there's a lot of my Maimonim, and the Rebbe is Medayik in this, both my Maimonim. When you see life, life begs the question, where do I come from? It says in Chassidus, every living thing knows that it's not just chemistry and biology and electricity. If you're alive, especially if you're a human being, you know that there's something about your being living which has to do with a neshama. Meaning it comes from outside the universe. It's not physical, it's ruchniistic. But in this world, you know that your life is spiritual, but you don't know where that spirituality comes from, unless you're Kedusha, you understand? So the Rebbe says, the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings the Pas Vata Machaye is a further ayah at the purpose of Perek Yud Daled versus Perek Yud Gimel. Is that a Perek Yud Gimel, the Rebbe is explaining how the Eibishter is everywhere, even there was klippas, but he's hidden in those klippas. That's why they're able to be klippa. And in Perek Yud Daled, he's saying, no, the Eibishter is in the words klippas, and he dart in the nefin for his galus. And one of the diyukim is the word Va'ata Machaye. Right? Va'ata Machaye es kulam, you give life to everything, it's a pasuk. The ha'oris, aid, and the key, that there's a trace of divine light, harinimshach, which is brought forward, lahaves, to create, ulahaches, and to give life, as kol and Evrahim, every single one of the creations, from me'ayin, from a non-existential state, liyesh, to an independent existential state. Right? So he brings the pasuk machaya, and then immediately translates it not like the pasuk. First made machaya, mahava machaya. So the Rebbe in the Maimer says that the Alter Rebbe is the one who says this. Al tikre mechaya ela mahava. Now we know Al tikris from Shas. We know Al tikris from Mishas and Braises. Here you have an Al tikris from Alter Rebbe. This Al tikris doesn't say in the Met. This Alter Rebbe said Al tikri. Yeah. We say every day in Davening Al tikri halochas, alichas halochas. Al tikre bo noyach, ala boy noyach. Here you have an Al tikri from Alter Rebbe. Al tikri mechaya ela mahava. So the Rebbe says, I'm more in the kavod. What is the meaning of Al Tikri? What does it mean, Al Tikri? There's rules of learning Chazal, yeah? There's rules of learning Chazal. And the rules of learning Chazal are explaining Psukim, yeah? If the Eibishter wanted to say Halachis Eilam instead of Alichas Eilam, he would have written Halachis Eilam. If the Eibishter wanted to say v'chol boy noyach with Hashem instead of bon noyach, he would have said boy noyach. So he says bon noyach. I'll take him. He doesn't mean what he says. I'll take him. So wissen. Make nicht das, make the pesandish. If he meant to say it, let him say it. What kind of spiel is it? So of course you all know the Maimon from the first Maimon, Vasei Lagani, when the Rebbe spoke Yud Aleph, Al Tikra Vayikra Vayakri. So the Rebbe brought right away that it says in Kol Yashas that when you have the rule of limud of Al Tikri, you read it both ways, not just one way. So it's not the pshat you're saying the first word is wrong. It's saying that there's another word, it's an additional word. But here the Rebbe adds a higoyin. The Rebbe says that some ideas have a chitzonius and a pnimius. And the purpose is the pnimius. But it's hard to see the pnimius. So you start off with the chitzonius. And the chitzonius leads you to the pnimius. Like v'chol bo nayech. Right? But the Eibishter's kinder. What's the Eibishter's kinder? We're makabel from the Eibishter. What al tikre bo noyech ala bo noyech? We're the Eibishter's builders. We're mashpiyah to the Eibishter. It's the idea that a Yid is makabel from the Eibishter is much easier to understand than there's an idea that a Yid klayochel is mashpiyah to the Eibishter. That's why it's al tikre. He starts off saying something which is easier to understand. And then he says, go from the easy to the hard. Al tikre bo noyech. I'm Hashem's child. My father's teaching me Teda. Ela bo noyech. We're building up the Eibishter klayoch. And the same is true of tikre haliches and halachas. And the same is true here, says the Rebbe. Of the two things, how Hashem gives life to the world, and the fact that Hashem creates the world yesh mayayin, it's a lot easier to preach that Hashem gives life. Because life you see. Order you see. Beauty you see. Chayes you see. When you look at the beautiful world, you know an artist made it. But when you look at a rock, you look at the choymer, at the material, it's nothing. So there's al tikri. The pasuk says, because when you look at the life in the world, you look at your neshama, you see the Eibishter immediately. Go from the chitzonius to the pnimius. Go from observing life in the world and come to recognize that not only is the life in the world, the madrega of putting a neshama into the guf, but that the Eibishter creates the guf himself. Because safe calls safe, that's deeper. Yesh mayayin, creating the guf, is a deeper inyan than putting the neshama into the guf. Because this is yesh mayayin and this is just yesh mayesh. But you say it in this eifin. So the Rebbe says that this one line of the Rebbe is menamis to all of this. He starts with Atam Achayes Kulam and he translates lahaves lahachis. So the Rebbe translates this one line to say that the Frierdiker was being menamis to what it says in Tanya, Al Tikre Mechaya. The pasuk says Mechaya, but you should know pshat in the pasuk that first you come to see how the Hashem gives life, and then you have to come to see that it's not just giving life; it's pasuk giving existence. As such, lahaves ulahaches is kol nevroyim meyayin lish. Everything in the world that Hashem creates.
Isn't mahaves a prerequisite for the haches?
In Zman it is.
So why you say
But in Hasaga it's not.
But Hasaga, you see lahachis, the first is
That's right.
lahaves.
That's right.
By a doim there's no lahachis, there's only lahaves.
So it says in Tanya that there is.
I said, well, that's a chiddush.
In for Nariza, right? That is a chiddush. Right, it is a chiddush.
But what you would see is you would see lahachis.
Lahaches. So the Altik Mechaya Mahava. It's a beautiful word. And it's a klal. In this Maimed, the Rebbe Posh explains this klal for an Altikri in a beautiful way. It's a shtickle nigla Posh. What's the type of the klal Altikri? The Eibishter says in the pasuk a word which is easy to understand. Vayikra, Avram taught the people the Eibishter. Altikra Vayikra, El Vayakra. He taught so well, other people were also teaching. It's one leading to the next. That's how the pasuk is written. Ukedi Isa begeres Akedir Simer Chav. It says in Tanya that when the Eibishter creates the world, it goes so low as ha'ara, that a trace of godliness is present. Now, and according to the Maimer of Memdad, you have to add one word. Revealed. B'chol ha'nivroyim v'ha'neitzim v'ha'nasim, and all the creations of Elam Abriya, of all the creations of Elam Yitzira, and all the creations of Elam Asiyah. So it takes taka, a trace, a tzimtzum of Edim. So, but wherever you look in the creation, you're going to see a lakus. Wherever you look in the creation, you're going to see get lachayt. The Eibush is revealed everywhere. Shuha'er v'achayes, or the key, it's the light and the life of a lakus. And in the Maimer of Dalet Mem, the sugya that starts off this whole business of shame. Tafshin Dalet Mem is one ikar word. How come the Friedrich Rebbe doesn't mention shame in this Perek? But before he mentions it, he says that we have from other places, Oir, Chayes, and Koyach. Oir, Chayes, and Koyach. So Oir and Chayes go together. And Koyach is separate. And you'll see later on that himself is going to separate Oir and Chayes from Koyach. That's why I have over here these two words. Ha'oir v'chayes elikim. What's the difference between Oir and Chayes? Oir is save of kalam. And Chayes is mamala kalam. So both of them are dvekas. Both of them are connected to the Eibush, they reveal the Eibush, they're close to the Eibush. But Oir doesn't adapt to go into a keli. Chayes adapts to be able to go into a keli, right? So the Rebbe says, even though it's ha'ara, in the end there's a Eir, which is like a makif, save klam, v'achayes, which is like mamala klam, and a pnimi, or the key, shenimshe b'chol and evroim, which is brought to every creation. And again, I'm going to say this every line. According to the Maimon of Tov Shin Dalad Mem, it's not only the presence of Lakus everywhere, the Lakus is everywhere begilui. That's the Chiddush of Perek Yudal. The Perek you see Lakus begilui even in Klip. Ukamaimon, he brings the apostle, the Gemara, Hazon no Mefanis, the Eibush gives Zenis and Panosa, Mekanye the aiming from the horns of, but the aim is like kind of a mythological creature. I don't know what you want to call it, a unicorn.
A deer, no?
The aim is an antelope. It's for sure not a deer. The Shah is which antelope? It's a I don't know an oryx. It's an aim, huh? Unicorn sounds right, yeah. Ad beyakinim till the eggs of lice. So the Rebbe explains a Kabbalah what this means. The Rebbe in his Maimed explains Kanye the aim is the highest medeg of kedusha, and beyakinim is the lowest medeg of klipa. And I was bringing to Makoidus. Everything's Makoidus. It's beautiful, but he pushed a tight his eyes. What's an aim? An aim is an animal. That's a very high madreg. Of that, I think it's Kesed. The keren, the horn of the Re'im is higher than the Re'im itself. So the Rebbe brings from Kisvei Arizal that the Re'im is Ksorim. It's 10 Ksorim, I think.
Doesn't say Beis Hamikdash? Re'im, Shechem, Re'im is the Beis Hamikdash. Has to be like the Re'im.
B'cher Sheirei Hodalei v'Kane Re'im Kanav. That's written by Yeshua. The Beis Hamikdash is a different word. That okay, in this yet. But he says so the horn of the aim is like Kesser Shabbat. So the Friedrich Rebbe brings a Ma'im Chazal, brings a Gemara. I have a son-in-law who's an extraordinary young man. There's one footnote from the Rebbe on this page. So his hachana for Yud Shvat is to ask himself why the Rebbe made this order. If the Rebbe can bring Gemara, it's not Sach Gemara to bring in. If the Rebbe says Re'ei Avodah Zarah Gil Beis, it's not Pshat. It's a mocker for the fact that the Eibush gives Mezenis to Panosa. So he's bothering me, whatever, for some reasons he's bothering me, but why? What's the difference between Mezenis and Panosa? But the Rebbe brings here Re'ei Avodah Zarah Gil Beis. There's something about Zen Panosa. Kani Re'eim. It's in the highest, in Kesser itself, it's the highest education. We give chayes to them. And Be'ekinim goes on Klipa. How does Be'ekinim go on Klip? He brings two ideas. And one of them is that Kinim is Begematria Kuf Chof. Kinim is the numerical equivalent of 120. And 120 goes on the Kuf Chof Siruf of Shem Elakim. Shem Elakim has 5 letters, not 4 letters. It says in Sefer Yetzirah that a word with 5 letters you can write in 120 different arrangements. If you have 5 letters, like the Elikim is 5 letters, Aleph, Hey, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem, right? Put an Aleph first, and then you can have 24 tzirufim. You'll have 6 tzirufim with the Lamed first, 6 tzirufim with the Hey first, 6 with the Yud first. Then you put the Lamed first. So you have 24 times 5 is 120 tzirufim. So it says in Kabbalah that the Kuf Chav tzirufim Shem Elikim goes on Klippe. Particularly the last Memches, the last 48. Because Elikim is 5 letters, and each ois has 24 tzirufim. So you have Eile Yam, right? Sometimes it's Mi Eile, sometimes it's Eile Yam. Mi Eile, Mi is higher than Eile. Mi is Bina, Eile Zoh. But Eile Yam, Eile Zoh, Yam is Malchus. So you have the 24 tzirufim of the Yud, 24 tzirufim of the Mem, and that's Admas B'nei Chom. You know, Chom is Memches, 48. It goes in the last 48 tzirufim of Shem Elikim. So Be'ekinim, Kinim is Begematria Kuf Chof, that goes on the Klippus, that the Eibush gets highest from Kanya to Aim, which is the highest Madregas of Kedusha. In other words, it's a Maimah Chazal, it's a Gemara. But the Rebbe says, what's the pnimius of this Maimah Chazal? The Eibush is Mezonu finds from the highest Madregas of Kedusha, which is Keser Sheba Keser Haiden Ishtashlus, at Beyakin, and Beyakin goes in the lowest Klippas Mamish. Weiter. The Ha'oid, V'hachayis, that the light and the life, and again, notice, the opposite of Oid Chayis in this Maimah is going to be Koyach. In the Rebbe's Kasha from Dalad Mem, it's going to be shame. But Oid and Chayis go together because in Oid and Chayis the Alakus is Begilui, and in Koyach it doesn't have to be Begilui. Meir v'nimshach, it shines and it's drawn down. Gam b'madreg eis ta'achtem tos madreges v'eis shvem the very, very lowest. How low? Not only into the lowliness of klippus that the Eibishter created, even in the lowliness of klippus that man creates. And the klippus that man creates are lower than the klippus Eibishter says in Tanya Perich of Dalit, that a Yid doesn't have Aveda. It's worse than klippus itself. Right? Side the Ruchni is the klippus. The Rebbe says the Ruchni is the klippus. Yidei has rib einim lo guf chumri. Yidei has rib einim. And he's not made it. But over the Eibishter's word, Shalei b'shechot Hashem bakam baruch. The Ruchni is the klippus have three limitations. They don't have a guf. They know about Hashem. And they'll never do something with the Eibishter's instructions. Even if it's Mishlachas Melachim Shabbat, it's a bad thing. A Yid doesn't have Aveda is worse because he's in a goof. He forgot about the Eibishter and he's being made, he's going against his Teva. That's in the beginning of Vadalit. Later on, the Rebbe brings Nachmeder. Not only is a Yid doesn't have Aveda, a person doesn't have Aveda, lower than a Ruchne Klipa is lower than a Gashmi is Kemaima Yitush Kodmach. Because it says, Upkedose is Borech Shamra Rucham, the Teva of wild animals that are representative of the lowest Klipas. The Eibishter is guarding them. They shouldn't go lower than the Teva, like the Dugma from Daniel gave Aroyes, that the lions wouldn't kill him. And when a person doesn't have Aveda, he's going lower than his Teva. So a Yid who doesn't have Aveda is worse than Klipas. He's even worse than the things that are getting higher from the Klippa in the Gashmizik world. And of all the Avedas that a Yid could do, the lowest Aveda is when he uses the Teda to be against the Teda. That's how the Rebbe says it. So the Rebbe brings, or Komesha Kosov, he brings the middle Rebbe, Maisam and Shaidas. There's a high Shaidas and there's low Shaidas, and low Shaidas, the Makar of Klippa, you could look in the Maimed. Im Esek Shamayim Shamata, if I present myself to the heavens, you're there. Vatzia Sha'el, even if I present myself to the deepest abyss, Hineka, you're there as well. So the Rebbe says, Vos mein Sha'el, Sha'el mein Gehenim. Vos mein Gehenim, a Klippa was mentioned by Shafen. That's what the Rebbe teaches. Why? If no person does no Aveda, there's no need for a Gehenim. Because the Gehenim is a place of Oynish. Oynish is a Tetzah of Aveda. So, Vatzia Sha'oli Neka means you go to a place of Klippa, which the Eibishter didn't create. It's a Klippa that only exists because a person doesn't have Aveda, and he's adding a new dimension of Klippa, which is Kvayachal lower than the Klippas the Eibishter created. You go to over there, you find the Eibishter also. And then the Rebbe brings Nachavart, which is mamish crazy. That in the Nevuas Chana, she says, Moirid Sha'el Vayal. Hashem Moirid Memis Mechai. Hashem Moirid. It's Chana is talking about her life. And she was so low because she had no children and the Alagan Zamais and the Eibishter Rachmanas got. So you have a Shidna Lashenis. One of the Lashenis, Moirid Sha'el Vayal. The Eibishter lowers us till the abyss and hicks us out. So the Rebbe teaches, what's it, Moirid Sha'el Vayal? That the Eibishter wants to gain again, that we don't have Aveda. Why did the Eibishter make a Sha'el? In other words, why does the Eibishter allow that a human being could make a bad Bechira and be good that there should be a place of Einish, a Klip of Gehenim, which is lower than the Klippas the Eibishter made? Naturally, it's also for the sake of Ayol. There's a Yerida Zu, Tzerach Aliyah includes the Yerida and Aveda. That's the Rebbe teaches it. So this is the Pshat. Ain't safe lamata adain tachlis. You can find the Eibishter not only in the klippas that the Eibishter created. You can find the klippas which have to do with the Eibishter, with the bechira chavs of people, because the Eibishter gave us this bechira. Nicht aber so misgaba sein. A viele me falt rein, so bekan alles kriegen von dort. As the Rebbe teaches this pasuk im Esek Shamayim Sham Ata Vatzia She'elinek, and he says the Zehu is bonus gedela. This is an incredible greatest bonus. Begduos Hashem in thinking how great the Eibishter is. What's the Hisbananus? Shenimshach b'chol seder ishtalshlus. The Eibishter brought all the seder ishtalshlus, mi madrega lemadrega, from step to step, ad madregas beruah mayesa shvel, the very lowest creations, which includes klippas, including a klippa which a person makes using the Torah against the Ratzon of the Eibishter. Ubi acheles kol adam v'adam. It's within the possibility of every human being. Gama yesa poshut. A poshut be a simplest person. Ladies has to know this, because rei gedula savaya. We all see the greatness of the Eibishter. And that's the diak. Why do we see it? Because not only is the Eibishter present everywhere, the Eibishter is present everywhere in a way of gilui. And that's the chiddush of Perikut Dal, or Perikut Gimel, in Ein Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis. He's everywhere, and he's everywhere bez galus. It says in the mind from the Va'era, in the inyan of God Hashem Be'er Lekeinu, that the greatness of Hashem is demonstrated by the many creations, and that's a mashal, it's a metaphor, it's a klau for the idea that whatever the Eibishter creates, even the biggest klippa, soft, kol soft, it brings to Gila Lakus and the covet of the Eibishter. So he says, this contemplation, it causes in a person an incredible reaction. Right? The word spol means to react, to respond. From the fact that wherever you live, you could see evidence of the Eibishter. You know, I taught this mime 20 years ago. Must have been this page. Even with this lesson. I was teaching in 770. 20 years ago, when I taught in 770, on a Sunday, I had 20 or 30 or 40 women. Now, if I teach on Sundays now, the women are starting to come, but I didn't have those. In the earlier years, when I first started teaching at Agreisa Elam, so I pushed then saw in a science magazine a mashal I thought was incredible. They have places where they store nuclear waste. Yeah. What does that mean? We used to have, and we should really still have, that's my opinion, energy made from nuclear energy. In other words, nuclear reactors, that they use these chain reactions to produce energy. It's cheap and it's clean, if you're careful. If you're not careful, at a much cheaper cost, and a much cleaner cost than petroleum. They're all shut down now because of the different accidents that happened. But they used to use nuclear power plants for energy. So these nuclear power plants are made from radioactive material. Plutonium, these are very heavy metals. They have a very high atomic number, and they're very radioactive. Radioactive means that their whole chush is hepech haseder. The meaning of a living thing is order. That's what meaning organism means. The way they produce energy is by oscillating, by moving. So it's mamish death. Radioactivity is the word. It's the opposite. A living being needs order. Radioactivity means breaking order. It's death. So it's very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. So they use these rods and then they get used up. I don't know what it means they get used up. They're no longer producing energy. So they have to bury them. But they have a half-life of 10,000 years. It's a long time, 10,000 years. And they're radioactive for 10,000 years. So they find places deep under mountains, not near faults, not near tectonic plates, and they're hoping it'll be safe in these places for 10,000 years. So someplace in Arizona, under some mountains, they bury these rods. But every once in a while, they open up the place where they keep it, the vault, to make sure that it's not leaking. And they opened it up, and they found organisms there. They found living creatures that are living, that can eat radioactivity. You know what that means? There's creatures, the Eibishter made that a living, that can eat death. It's not to be believed. It's unbelievable. So the way the scientists, we don't live in a planet that has life on it. We live in a living planet. The Eibishter created life on this earth. You create a physical thing that muhuse is mavis, and someone's going to live from it. So they were writing that maybe they could use these organisms to eat up this radioactivity, and they have to worry about 10,000 years. These guys have babies quickly, you know what I'm saying? When they run out of food, what you'll do, yeah, there's another problem. But imagine that. So I use it as a marshal. For wherever you look, you see life. You have a place that's designated for death itself, and you find life there. Ein Seif, in other words, the diuk is not just Elikus is everywhere. Elikus is everywhere is Galus. Made it Elayol in Gehenna is for Angilia Elikus. And the Rebbe says, let's read those words again. His bonon zeis oisei spoilers gedel benefesh. It makes a person react with great excitement. Mizeh shereim b'muchash mamish. You see vividly. You see b'chush. Elikus. Now, Sataka, how is this? How is it that the Eibishter creates such low creations, like he said in Perikut Gimel, till Klippas, till the worst kind of Klippas, and wherever you look, not only is the Eibishter present, but the Eibishter is Beis Galus there, and this is the teretz. The Kol Zehu, this idea, that wherever you look, not only does the Eibishter have to be there to give life and creation, but the Eibishter has to be there in the way of Beis Galus, is Lefi Shoha'er, who ain't safe b'yetzim. Godliness is ain't safe in a way that's called etzim. In other words, it's ain't safe, it's not kamus, it's eichus. Godliness is not infinite because it goes on and on and on and on. Godliness is infinite because its basic definitions has no limit. And because it has no limit, listen to these ACS, al kain ein safe gam kain lehis pashtuse. There's no end to its expansion where it radiates. Beribay amadreges vashtalshas on the multiple steps and the chain reaction ad lamata mata mamash to the very lowest levels. And then he adds more. First of all, it's ein seif is pashtuse. And second of all, ubekomokam shunim shachom is pashat, no matter where he goes, eine beispoilus ve'eine beishtanas. Eine beispoilus means he touches everything and nothing touches him. He changes everything and nothing changes him. And at the next page on the top, which we can do next week, first line, turn to page 1 second, the Rebbe adds one more thing. Last words of the first line. Lefi she'eni mis'aref. These are three expressions. The first two expressions gets two parakim, and the third parakim it's a third parakim, its own parakim. Yeah? The Eid ain't safe is ain't safe at the level of etzem. Etzem means it's ain't safe for you cannot be changed. Godliness goes everywhere. It touches everything. It's invested in everything. And of course, when you speak about the word oir and chayis, oir means it comes everywhere and remains the same. Chayis means pnimi. It goes everywhere and it adapts. But ein seif be'etzem means that as much as it goes and as much as it changes, as much as it adapts, doesn't go, doesn't change, doesn't adapt at all. Ein seif be'etzem does not allow his spoilers. It doesn't allow shinui. And it doesn't allow his sadvas. Godliness is everywhere. But God's relation with the creation has an incredible impact on the creation, and the creation has no impact on him. It's a one-way touch. He touches without being touched. In physics and in chakira, right? Kol meiniyam isnanea ba'atzmei. If I'm moving you, I have to be moving myself. Okay, but the Eibishter ain't safe. Ain't safe the special to say. Ain't by his spoilers. Godliness goes everywhere. It adapts, it makes available everything, but as much as it changes to give chayes to the whole creation, it itself makes completely unchanged. And we'll do this next week, Mr. Shem.